want you to come out of here with is confidence. All right? I want you to understand that the church's teachings can be defended at the highest level. Okay? And I'm not going to be able to give you all the information to back up every single point, but I want you to be confident that the information is available. And most of it's available either at the Ruth Institute or at HLI. You know, I mean, we have a lot of information, and the science is on our side, people. Okay, so when you hear these crazy German bishops going off about how the church has changed its teaching because science, seriously, no, the science is on our side here. So that's really a ridiculous thing to be saying. So I want you to come away with this with some confidence. The Ruth Institute is an international interfaith coalition to defend the family and build a civilization of love. And this QR code that is on the screen right now is where you can go to sign up for our newsletter and also to receive a free ebook that we have created that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And Kiara has a sign-up sheet. You can sign it the old-fashioned way with pen and paper, or you can shoot that QR code, and you'll be taken right there. And what we're giving out right now is we created this ebook called Protecting Your Family from the Top 5 Gay Myths. And basically it's the science going along showing that nobody's born gay, among a few other myths, right? But so if you want that and want to obtain that, you'll get it right away if you sign up electronically. Okay, so we can think about the sexual revolution as having 3 different levels of analysis, okay? So on one level, the deepest level, there are theological and philosophical errors that are playing themselves out in society, right? So it's helpful to understand that, what the philosophical errors are, but you're not really going to be able to go to Congress with that or something, you know what I mean? But it is helpful to understand, and we have a lot of intellectuals who work at that level. But we also then need to bring it down to the public policies, right? Because there are a lot of very damaging, destructive public policies that are affecting everybody's daily lives. And they're taking those philosophical errors, some of which go back before the Reformation, right? I'm thinking about nominalism, right? You can think about transgenderism as being nominalism on steroids, so to speak. And so the and a lot of you are engaged in the public policy analysis and debate. That's part of what you have to do. And then finally, there's the kitchen table level of this thing, right? Which is, it's affecting how people are living their lives. It's disrupting people's families. It's making people miserable at the personal level. And many of you, I would dare say everybody in this room, has family members or loved ones or friends who are breaking your heart. Right? And that you would love to be able to talk with and help, and you don't know what to do. Okay? So all of this is part of combating the sexual revolution. Some of you are called to different parts of this thing, right? Those of you who are working with the moms in the pregnancy care centers, you're doing the kitchen table stuff, right? You're one-to-one dealing with people and their issues, okay? But wherever you're called, it's valuable, I think, to understand that there's multiple levels going on here. So what I'm going to do today is I was asked to give you something practical. So what does it mean to be practical at the philosophical level? Well, it's a good thing to just understand what's going on, even if you're never going to give a lecture on Thomas Aquinas or something. It's good to understand what the whole structure looks like. At the public policy level, being practical means getting active. And that might mean that you are taking court cases to court to try to stop bad things from happening, or it could mean you're trying to influence legislation, or you're going to your local TV station and telling them to take this nonsense off the TV, or whatever your level of activism could be. That's what practical would mean in that context. But finally, at the kitchen table level, being practical means, what do we say to our loved ones? What do we say to our loved ones? And I'm going to tell you right now that I don't have a magic formula that's going to bring all of your loved ones back, right, back from the brink, because we all know that. And a lot of times, it's easier for them to hear it from somebody other than us, right? People don't always want to listen to their mom or their grandma or whatever. They want to listen to somebody else. So have this in your mind. You might not be the person who can help your family member, but you may be the person who can help somebody else's family member, right? Because you may be the one who's got a little more distance, right, and can do that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But now we're going to talk about the kitchen table. All right, that's what we're going to do here for a little while. Now, I want to just mention how this fits together. Okay, my first foray into all of this with the study of the family came about because of our two children. We adopted a little boy from a Romanian orphanage, and then 6 months later gave birth to a baby girl. Okay, so we have two children who are 3 years apart in chronological age, but they're psychologically kind of the same age, right? And they arrived within 6 months of each other. So we had 2 kids in 6 months, which is a record even for a Catholic. So, but what it taught us is that absolutely children need their parents. See, because our little boy had been in a minimal care orphanage where all the most basic things didn't happen, right? And so we had to, what it took to help him was so intense compared to just kind of the automatic things that our little girl did. So in this book, Love and Economics, I really dealt with the fact that kids need their parents, and specifically they need their mamas. And if you choose to get that book, it's over there. And the data, I wrote this in 2001, okay, and then had to rewrite it in 2008. The data is a little dated, but that doesn't matter, because the issue is human nature, right? And so an old study that tells you kids need their parents tells you that we knew from the beginning that this wasn't working. See what I mean? So don't be afraid if the data is old. All right. So that's the subsequent edition, Love and Economics. That's what we have there now. So the basic message of the Ruth Institute is that kids need their parents, and that family breakdown is a big problem. Every form of family breakdown is a big problem, and that's what I want to talk about with you today. We, a few years ago, developed something that we called Healing Family Breakdown Spiritual Workshop. It was our attempt to get this kind of information in front of people in a form that we hoped that they could receive, right? To address some of the problems that are caused by family breakdown. And before I go into this material, I am going to share this material with you, and it's going to be all workshoppy. I'm going to stop talking. Here's why we did it. Here was the thought process, okay? And you can think this is crazy. It is a little crazy. But anyway, the reason we did it, in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Proposition 8, and they overturned the Defense of Marriage Act. And I remember when they were doing that, when they did it, and I read the decision and everything, I about lost my mind, right? Because I could see how bad it was. I mean, it was so bad. They were just making up the law. And as was mentioned in my bio, I was very involved in Prop 8 and campaigning for it, arguing on its behalf and so on. But I thought, crap, if they can just rewrite the law because they feel like it, what are we going to do? You know what? I don't want to do another political campaign if they can just change the law whenever they feel like it. You know, what's the point of that? So we started thinking, these people, they have so much power. They have so much influence. What are we going to do, you know? And so it became, the thought that came to us was the idea that there have been millions of people harmed by the whole sexual revolution. Not just gay marriage, right? Everybody's talking about gay marriage. But you understand, you don't get to gay marriage overnight, right? We got to gay marriage through no-fault divorce and contraception and lots of other things led us up to gay marriage. So millions of people have been harmed. What if we could enlist the people who've been harmed? What if we could help them? What if we could make them advocates? There's millions of them. You know, this is a target-rich environment. You know, maybe that would be something that we could do. And when you add to it the fact that people who have lived according to the sexual revolution are often our worst enemies. Why are they our worst enemies? I want you to analyze this, because this is a theological problem. This is where the philosophical and theological comes right into the practical. People are walking around with guilty consciences. Those of you who pray outside abortion clinics, have you ever had people come unglued as they drive by? Right, you know what I'm talking about. Right, they're a mess, right? That's not normal. That's not rational. That's the guilty conscience just blaring out, right? So there are worst opponents in one sense of the word. So if you could take even one of those people and turn them into an advocate. That's like moving a lot of resources across the line to our corner. You see what I mean, right? And think about somebody like Abby Johnson. Okay, Abby Johnson, perfect example of that. She did wrong for a long time, and boom, overnight, she became a great advocate for our side. Well, you multiply that by all the other people who've been harmed, and now you're talking about something, potentially. So in any case, we started this concept of healing family breakdown. And what I'd like you to do on this little card that we have here, okay, is I'd like you to write down the names of 3 difficult people in your family. Now, one thing I always would say at the beginning of these things is that when people come to these things, have any of you worked in post-abortion healing? Have any of you done that work? Okay, so you know that it's hard to get people to come, right? And they make excuses at the last minute to not come, right? Because they want to deal with it, they don't want to deal with it. Okay, we have the same experience with this whole thing. So let's start with the idea that this program, we're pretending you came for the workshop, okay? So this program may stir up painful feelings for you, and I would ask you that you try to hang in there with us, all right? We have no illusions we're going to solve everything in one day, but we do think we can help you feel permitted to experience the feelings of grief and loss and anger that you may have from your family, deepen your understanding of what happened in your family, and make progress towards healing yourself and others. So you've written down the names of 3 difficult family members, and now I'm going to talk. We have 3 little parts to this, which are listed on here, which I'll get to in a moment. The first part is, why is there so much family breakdown? What are we dealing with here? Now, I'm not here to judge you or to judge anybody else, but I want to just tell some of you what life was like in the 1970s when all this was getting going. There was this great song that was on the radio all the time, Mary McGregor, Torn Between Two Lovers. And for those of you who are of a certain age, this song is now going to be in your head. You won't be able to get rid of it. But basically, the song was celebrating adultery. It's basically saying, oh, well, I have 2 lovers, and it'll be fine. It was kind of the bottom line of the song. Okay, so I was alive in the 70s and the 80s, and I know people who did this, who tried this, who believed this. And I can honestly report to you that not a single time did it work. Not once did it actually work. I saw divorces, I saw abortions, I even saw suicide. Okay? It never works. But the other day, I'm in the supermarket, and I'm hearing this song, lyrics and all. Okay, so they're still pumping this message out there that this is okay, you know, and people thought that was going to be okay. So, what I'd like to do now is have you open up this this flyer that I have you get. Okay. I'll just give you a little background. We call these the 12 survivors of the sexual revolution, all right? And we came up with this about 10 years ago, as I mentioned. There are 2 groups that we would add to this today that we don't have on here. And that one group is transgender people who think they were born in the wrong body. They're not even on the list, right? The other group that is not on here are people who have survived sexual abuse or sexual harassment. They're not on here. So let's just briefly take a look at who these people are. Number 1, children of divorce. And what were you told about children of divorce? We were told kids are resilient. Going down the column, pornography addicts and their families. What were we told? Pornography is a victimless crime. Going down, cohabitors with regrets. You never hear about them. But there are plenty of people who lived with their boyfriend or lived with their girlfriend and then figured out that it was a mess. Cohabiting is as good as marriage and maybe better. That's what we were told. The reluctantly single parent. No single parent has ever wished that the child's other parent would step up to the plate and be around. We were told that too. Donor-conceived persons, the top of the middle column. Donor-conceived persons are thrilled to be completely wanted by their intended parents. Post-abortive women and men. No woman ever regrets her abortion. The gay lifestyle refugees. No one who experiences same-sex attraction has ever changed his or her behavior in any significant way. Isn't that what we're still told? You're born gay, once gay, always gay. Hookup culture refugees. Casual sex is harmless as long as you use a condom every time. The heartbroken career woman. Successful, educated women can have it all, including marriage and children. Children of single parents. Children don't really need two parents. The reluctantly divorced. Divorce is always mutual. And finally, the medical victims of the sexual revolution. There are no health risks associated with casual sex if you use a condom every time. Now, what we have here are lies. We have 12 survivors of the sexual revolution, and we have 3 or 4 lies with each one. So what I want to show you, I want to just tell you a little story about something that happens in California from time to time. And that is, this is something that's called the Tool Fog. There's a part in Central California, and I used to drive this with my children. My daughter is going to a Irish dance festival one time, and I have my teenage son in the seat next to me, my daughter in the back, our 2 foster kids in the back, and we're driving at night trying to get to Fresno, okay? And the Tool Fog comes in. Now let me show you about the Tool Fog. That's the center line. That's the median, that's the line on the side, okay? This is some serious fog, okay? So we're driving down the road, and I'm putting along, and my son says, "Mom, you're going down the wrong side of the road." And sure enough, there's headlights coming at me, right? So obviously, I survived, I got on. But the point is, you're talking about some pretty serious crashes going on from the Tool Fog. And my point in bringing this up is that we've got 12 survivors of the sexual revolution, 3 to 4 lies apiece. There are a lot of people driving down the wrong side of the road in a fog. And there are a lot of people crashing and burning. And you may think that the problems you have are just your problems. The crash could start with just one car, but it doesn't end with just one car. All these other people, right, get involved in this big pileup. And that's kind of the way the sexual revolution works. We're told that each and every one of these things is your own private business, but there's not I can't think of a single sexual sin that's really like that. Every sexual sin has repercussions and ripple effects all the way through the family and the community, okay? And so one person crashing causes a lot of problems for other people. So the reason I want to bring this up is because the people who are crashing and burning, it's not all their fault. It's not all their fault. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through this little guided meditation that we'll do at our workshop, just so you can kind of get the feel for how this works. So what I want you to do is think about one of the people that you wrote down on your card, okay, and just focus on one person at a time, okay? And so picture this person, close your eyes, minimize distractions, and picture this person at a time when you found him or her particularly endearing. Place yourself in a situation of love for this person, no matter what might have happened since. Now, keeping your eyes closed, picture some of the ways that you believe other people hurt this person through their choices. Pay particular attention to any sexual choices of others that have harmed your loved one. Now think of whether this person has hurt others through their mistaken sexual choices. Have they hurt themselves as well? Have they hurt you? Now I want you to picture yourself saying, it was not all your fault. Can you say this even if some of it was their fault? What we want to be able to say is, I'm sorry that this happened to you. All right, that's where we're headed. I'm sorry this happened to you. Even if it caused a lot of problems. I'm sorry that this has happened to you. All right? So, what I'm going to do is, again, think about something a family member says that's hurtful to you. and just jot it down. And we'll think about a way of processing those hurtful things that people say to you. Okay, and we'll come back to it. All right, so what I want to talk with you now is about what the Ruth Institute refers to as the divorce ideology. And this is one part of the presentation today that I will say a little bit more about tomorrow. But I'm going to actually go into it in more depth today than I will tomorrow. So you'll have more information about this compared to what people will learn tomorrow. Okay, we always view everything from the perspective of the child. From the child's perspective, what is going on? What do we mean by divorce? So the divorce ideology is this deliberate separation of children from one of their parents, not because of an unavoidable tragedy, but because of choices that people have made. And so we include in this heading, we include not only divorce, but also the unmarried parent, cohabiting parents, remarried or other step-parents, and children of anonymous donor conception. Okay, all of that is under the heading of children being separated from one of their parents due to parental choices. Okay, not because somebody died or got mentally ill or something like that. And so what we have here, we put together this chart that summarizes the results of some of the social science research that has been done simply on children of divorce. Okay, the question of how do children fare from divorce, that has been studied for now over 25, 30 years. We have data on this. And the fact is, on pretty much anything you can name, the children of divorce are at risk for bad outcomes, for difficulties, for problems. They are at risk in pretty much anything that you can name. And we've summarized it here in this little table. Our friend Dr. Pat Fagan has written a paper called What Has Divorce Done to Children? What's Divorce Done to America? And this paper has 40 closely typed pages and 330 footnotes telling you the studies that have gone through children's academic performance, children's health, psychological performance, their ability to be in relationships, to establish relationships later in life, and so on and so forth. All of this has been studied thoroughly. And before I go any further with it, I want to give you my explanation for why I think that is. Okay, all of these different things, these are very specific things that we have listed here. Dr. Fagan has even more. Okay, what is it from the child's perspective that makes this so difficult, that makes family breakdown so difficult? Well, this is in part a natural and supernatural thing. Okay, at the supernatural level, we know God wants everybody to be born as the result of the loving embrace of their mother and father. Okay? This is what God has written into our bodies. This is what God wants. Okay. But at the natural level, if you just think about the natural level, because it's all incarnational and physical and everything, the child is the product of their mother's love, mother and father's love, okay? And when parents go to get divorced, here's what they're told to say in the United States, and probably it's similar here in New Zealand. You're told to say, Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced. We don't love each other anymore. We still love you, but we don't love each other anymore. Okay, so now you're 5 years old, and you're trying to think this through. Mommy and Daddy, I'm half mommy, I'm half daddy, and they say they love me, but they don't love each other. How does that even work? Well, it doesn't work, right? The child is baffled because it doesn't work. It's not true. It can't really be correct, right? If you really despise your child's other parent, this is a problem for the child, because whether you like it or not, that's part of who they are. And that is an undeniable fact for a lifetime. Now, what happens to children, at least in the US, and I bet it's similar here, is when there's a divorce and there's a separation, the parents live in 2 different houses, there's a custody settlement, and the child will spend different times in different homes, okay? And so now we know that our Lord Jesus told us that we must not get remarried after a divorce. We must not attempt that. That's adultery. But typically what happens is that they do get remarried, right? Sometimes the new person is in the background already before the divorce ever happens. That's what precipitates the divorce. And so here's the child who was born of the parents' first union, right? And now each of them have formed a new union. And when you're with your mommy's, at your mommy's house, your mommy and her new husband have a baby, and that baby gets to live with both parents all the time. And that baby sees hanging on the wall pictures of their whole family with their mom and their dad and with all their relatives on both sides of the family. Well, you don't have pictures like that at your mommy's house. You go to your daddy's house, same thing. He's got a new wife. They're interested in their new baby. They've got pictures of both sides of that baby's family over there. But there's no pictures of you. I have a friend who has 2 photos of herself with both parents. From a lifetime, 2 photos of herself with both parents. Okay? And you see that your half-brother, your half-sister, well, this isn't fair. They get their mom and dad all the time. And I know they don't have to move all the time. Okay? This is why the kids are so upset. I would submit to you, this is why they're upset. They don't know who they are. They don't really feel loved. And the parents may try. They may do their best to try. It's not that they have bad intentions, but the structure of the situation is working against them. And that goes with all Dr. Fagan's material as well. Let me now shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the concerns of the donor-conceived person. You like my image there with the baby barcode on its head? Okay, so one of the concerns that the adults will tell you, children of donor conception, they will tell you that they don't know who they are. They don't know one of their parents, whoever the so-called donor was. They don't know who that is. And they're angry that sometimes there's secrecy in the background. There's shame about the fact that they were purchased. You know, there was a contract that was formed, right? And they have a longing for that missing parent. It's not unusual for that. And sometimes they're a little bit nervous and freaked out over the possibility of encountering a half-sibling that they didn't know they had. I'm aware of a guy whose father, it turned out, donated sperm, sold his sperm, I think once a month for all the years that he was in medical school. And this guy was seeing people around his town who looked like him, right? And so it was like kind of strange, right? He eventually left that town. But anyway, you shouldn't have to worry about having 500 siblings. You shouldn't have to worry about that. But indeed, this is part of what is going on. From the child's perspective, the donor-conceived person, the family's broken before they're even born. See, because the break is permanent, it's legally enforced, right? And I know a lot of you in the pro-life movement have concerns about all the frozen embryos and all of the what is it called, selective reduction, right? There's a lot of killing that goes on. But even amongst the people who live, there's a lot of problems that are not being fully discussed. Okay, so the Ruth Institute has a dream that every child be welcomed into a loving home with their own mother and father married to each other. That's the Ruth Institute's dream. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning, right? And I imagine a lot of you have that very same dream. And the reason we have this dream is that so every child can have a relationship with his or her own parents unless an unavoidable tragedy prevents it. And so that every adult, without exception, can know who they are, so they can know their genetic identity and their cultural heritage. So even if your dad died, you know who he is, right? And your mom takes another spouse or something, you still know who your dad was, and your dad generally is a valued and treasured part of the family. That's why death is not the same as a deliberate separation. We refer to this as a structural injustice to the child. When these rights of the child are violated, we call this a structural injustice to the child. Because the parents could be doing the best they can, reading stories to them and taking them to school and all of that kind of stuff, but there's a problem in the structure, and they can't completely overcome it, even with the best of intentions often, okay? So we're dealing with, all of us, in this world of family breakdown, we're dealing with two competing worldviews. On one side is the Ruth Institute's worldview, that every child has identity rights and relationship rights with respect to their parents. And, here's the part nobody wants to hear, these rights of children impose responsibilities on adults and limits on adult behavior. We don't want to mention that part. Now, the competing worldview, every adult has a right to the sexual activity they want with a minimum of inconvenience, and kids just have to put up with whatever the adults choose to give them. We never say that part out loud because we'd be ashamed of ourselves if we said that part out. But this is approximately the view of the global ruling class and all of the so-called developed countries of the world. Thank goodness our African brothers and sisters are resisting this stuff, right? But so-called developed people, this is what we all think, this is what we're supposed to do. And in case you don't believe me, the United Nations has a dream. Listen to what the United Nations has to say. This is their definition of reproductive health. Reproductive health can be defined as a state of well-being related to one's sexual and reproductive life. It implies, according to our sacred text, that people are, quote, able to have a satisfying and safe sex life, and that they have the capability to reproduce and the freedom to decide if, when, and how often to do so. So my question is, who's responsible for providing this safe and satisfying sex life? That's what I want to know. And we have some crazy people, at least in the US, they call themselves incels. Have you heard of the incels? Involuntarily celibate, right? These are men who think themselves ill-used because they can't get a date. Okay, so they've taken it seriously that they are owed a safe and satisfying sex life. Okay, well, whatever. There you go. All right, so with all of this in the background, of how much family breakdown there is, of what it's meaning to people, what it's doing to people, let's go through a little bit more of activities and guided meditation, okay? And again, the family virtue that we're aiming for here is empathy, and we want to be able to say to people, I'm sorry this happened to you, okay? Because there are a lot of people, like I said, driving down the wrong side of the road in a fog, okay? And I'm sorry this happened to you. So let's once again do a little bit of guided meditation and quiet time. Because many people have been both perpetrators and victims of family breakdown. Many people have been victims of bad information and made bad choices that hurt ourselves or others. So close your eyes now and picture one of your difficult family members, one of your people. Picture them at a time that they were particularly aggravating. Place yourself, again, in a situation of love for them, no matter how upsetting the situation may have been. So you close your eyes and think about that. If this person has made some bad choices themselves, picture themselves explaining themselves. What is he or she saying to justify what they're thinking and doing? Don't picture yourself arguing right now. Don't try to talk them out of it. Just picture what they say about themselves. When they try to explain themselves, are they defensive? Are they trying to convince themselves? Are they trying to convince you? How do you picture them feeling? Do you see anything about their feelings and their experience that you may not have noticed before? If other people harmed this person, try to imagine what they're saying to themselves. Are they blaming themselves for the problems in their family? It's not unusual for children of divorce, for instance, to blame themselves for their parents' divorce. Think about that with respect to your person. Are they trying to bargain with God? Are they trying to bargain with the universe to make the problems go away? Are they trying to medicate themselves with drugs, alcohol, sex, or some other addictive activity or substance? All right, if you've had a few minutes. Again, normally we would be giving people time to talk at their tables and things like that. I don't think that's really appropriate here. We're not going to do that. But what I want to just point out to you is that if you are able to say, I'm sorry this happened to you, and break through the defensiveness and the excuse making and stuff, right? That can go a long way to restoring some of the relationships. Okay, that's really what we're trying to go here. So we're aiming for empathy, and we're aiming for, I'm sorry this happened to you. Because you are. You know, when you think about it, you are sorry that it happened to them, no matter what they might have done since. Okay, so what I'd like to do, before we take our break, is I'm going to share with you some of the discussion questions that we would share at this workshop, just so you can get a feel for, and we can talk about this at tea time. You know, you can talk about this amongst yourselves. But before we do that, I wanted to share a couple of interesting things that happened at these workshops that we used to happen. We did them at several different churches. I don't know, we must have done it about a half a dozen different times. And there was always a kind of Holy Spirit thing about who was sitting at the tables. We never assigned seats, you know. And things would happen at the table because what you would sometimes have is the person who happened to be assigned to your table or happened to be sitting at the same table would be just the sort of person you needed to hear from or talk to, okay? So one striking instance of that I can remember, this took place in Lake Charles, and there was a guy, an older guy, who had been divorced, and his 20-something daughter wouldn't speak to him. You know, it had been a very painful divorce. And this guy worked in the brick business, okay? So this is not like some wimpy kind of a guy. You know, he was a big man's man kind of guy. When he would talk about his daughter, there would be tears coming down his face. As it happened, at his table was a girl in her 20s whose parents were divorced. And it had never really entered her mind how painful some of those separations had been for her dad. She saw, in a sense, her dad and what this meant to him and meant in his life. So these are some of the things that would sometimes take place, right? Just because there are different perspectives on this thing. And if you can help people see through their own pain and their own situation that, you know, hey, this had ripple effects, we've never had a chance to talk about this, but you know, it hurt you, it hurt me, it hurt everybody involved, okay? So that's just another perspective for you to have in your mind as you're talking with people about these issues. And as I mentioned, you may or may not be able to do this in your own family, but you may be the person who can say, I'm sorry this happened to you, and then that person is a little bit more healed when they go back in and are talking with, you know, the immediate thorn in the side, so to speak, you know, the immediate person who hurt them. So let me just put out a couple of the questions that are worth reflecting on based on what we've talked about so far. Review in your mind and think about what all we include in the concept of family breakdown, okay? All the different ways that families can be broken in the modern world, okay? And the breaking and reconstructing, and the attempt to reconstruct is often destructive. I want to go back to one point about Catholic teaching, specifically Catholic teaching, which is that Jesus told us not to try another marriage, right? He told us that this is adultery. And if you talk to children of divorce for very long, you find out that the remarriage of their parents is often the most painful part of the whole thing. In other words, however difficult the divorce and separation itself may be, the fact that there are new spouses brought into the picture and new families, that actually multiplies the suffering and the pain of the children. And I can't help but think that our Lord knew that. That our Lord saw what this was going to mean to children and to families, to try to this attempt to reconstruct a family, and the attempt to be fair and all this kind of stuff, that it just really can never really be fully done. Okay, so now, if you think about adults you've known, maybe some of you have been in this situation that your parents were divorced. If you yourself have not experienced, think about other adults that you know who have had this experience. What was it like for them? Are they willing to talk about it? Right? Are you receptive? Are you able to listen to them when they talk about it? I had a friend recently tell me this story, that she said, Jane, my parents got divorced when I was 5 years old, and it's still bothering me. It's still hurting. And I said, what's going on, Amanda? And she said, well, my father is dying, and my stepmother will not allow me and my sisters to go be with him while he's dying. Okay? This is how bad it can get. Now people will say, well, it's not always that bad, that's terrible, they shouldn't have done that, yada, yada, yada. But the fact is, there's no principled reason why it can't get that bad, right? And when you have this idea that you're allowed to divorce and remarry in the new day, there's no stopping that kind of stuff. So this is a part of the picture. Just mention to you, I happen to know this, and maybe some of you are aware of this too. One of the most Catholic countries in the world today still is the Philippines. In the Philippines, the United Nations and all the usual suspects are breathing down their necks over every single aspect of their culture that is still Catholic. One of the aspects of their culture that is still Catholic is that divorce is possible, it's difficult, right? They don't have no-fault divorce. And just because you get divorced doesn't mean you get to have another marriage. Okay? So this is in a sense a Catholic divorce law, you could say. It's a policy inspired by Catholicism, you could say. Just because you get divorced doesn't mean you're free to marry another person under Philippine law. And of course that's what everybody wants to change, right? So if you just think about that, what we have in the West, this unlimited right of divorce and remarriage, and how destructive that is, and how unnecessary it is. In principle, you could get rid of abusive marriages or problematic marriages, and like that. You could deal with that without continual divorce and remarriage. Okay, so that's another thing to think about. Now, when Ruth Institute talks about our dream that every child be welcomed into a loving home with their own mother and father, do you have any fears about that? Do you have any concerns about that? Can you anticipate fears and concerns that people would have about that? That's another thing to think about and discuss. If you think about the question 4, we talked about structural injustices to children. Do you feel that you and your family members and the people that you're thinking about, did they experience these structural injustices? Did they experience any of that? And if so, how has that affected them? Okay, so I think, Madam Chairman, I think I'm ready to take a break. We're not doing Q&A or discussions here. Are they ready for us to?